We looked this morning in Sabbath school at how ancient Judaism was derailed by uniting Greek education with the Old Testament scriptures. By mingling that together, eventually the Bible was suppressed and Greek thought ruled in the ancient land of Israel. Now, folk, would we let that happen again? Would we allow what happened in ancient Israel to develop that brought about the cross of Calvary? Well, friends, I'm going to tell you here this morning, the reason we are here today in a self-supporting church is because that very thing has happened amongst us as Seventh-day Adventists. And the great bulk of this 20 million plus denomination that we call Seventh-day Adventism today, they are preparing, because of their uniting the Bible with worldly education. The Seventh-day Adventist denomination today is preparing to reject the Messiah when he comes the second time. And you say, well, prove that. Well, I'm glad you asked. Because that's exactly what I plan to do, is to show you how that has happened in Seventh-day Adventism. We go all the way back to the early 1880s, 1890s, into the 1900s. There was a place called Battle Creek Sanitarium. It was in Battle Creek, Michigan. Battle Creek Sanitarium was known, friends, all over America. In fact, it was known in greater parts of the world as well, because there was a renowned doctor at Battle Creek Sanitarium. Does anybody know his name? John Harvey Kellogg. That's right. You guys are cheating. That's what you're doing. You're reading off my slide. John Harvey Kellogg. He was at the cusp of all medical knowledge. What was John Harvey Kellogg's secret? Why was Battle Creek Sanitarium so famous? Well, if anybody came along with some new medical idea, John Harvey Kellogg would compare it with what Ellen White had written about health and healing. John Harvey Kellogg always kept at least 5 years ahead of the medical world. Battle Creek Sanitarium was so famous. You remember the guy who invented the car? What was the guy's name?
Ford.
Henry Ford. Henry Ford went to Battle Creek to get healthy. There was a president by the name of William Howard Taft. Went to Battle Creek, friends, to get healthy. Harvey Firestone, the Firestone tire magnate. Charles Goodyear. These famous people, Thomas Edison, they would go to Battle Creek Sanitarium. Why? Because people were being naturally healed by the methods used by John Harvey Kellogg. He taught the 8 laws of health. He taught a vegetarian diet. He taught the use of water in healing through fomentations, through hot and cold, through drinking water, through keeping your body clean by daily baths. John Harvey Kellogg believed that diet, water, getting good amounts of sleep at night, exercise, a word that so often in so many circles today is a bad word. In fact, I've given talks on health before where I've said, now I want to apologize to all of you because I'm going to use a word of profanity now. You know, and everybody goes, oh wow, the pastor's going to swear? And then I say, the word that's profane is exercise. Folk, we don't exercise. We think if we saunter out to our mailbox to get our mail, that we've gotten our daily exercise. That's a big joke. That's a joke. We've got to get our heart rate up to at least twice our resting heart rate. So if you wake up in the morning and you stick that little thing on your index finger and you press the button and it says your resting heart rate is like 60 beats a minute, then folk, at least 4 times a week, we should get our heart rate up to at least 120. At least. And we should get our heart rate going so that through the course of our exercise, we have sweat coming down our temples. Our shirt is changing color because we're actually sweating. That's what we need to be doing, because the whole point of exercise is to get the blood flowing through our system, for our blood to be cleaned of its toxins, so that then through our pores, through our sweat, that toxicity is going out of our body, so that our body becomes healthy, our mind becomes clear. That's what John Harvey Kellogg was teaching at Battle Creek Sanitarium. Now, one man, Dr. David Paulson, in 1891, asked Kellogg, he said, John, how is it that you're able to stay 5 years ahead of the rest of the medical profession? Well, Kellogg said this to Paulson: if something new was advocated, he instantly adopted it if, now here's the big if, from his knowledge of Ellen White's writings, it was sound. When other physicians finally accepted it after slowly feeling their way, Kellogg had a 5-year head start. He was 5 years ahead of them. On the other hand, Kellogg rejected some of the new medical fads because they didn't measure up to the light given Mrs. White. When other doctors finally discovered their mistake, they wondered why Kellogg had not been caught as they had. That's from a book by Richard Schaefer called Legacy, page 60. Folk, that's our only defense today. I mean, I know since becoming a vegetarian some 40-odd years ago, there's been that famous thing called the Atkins diet. How many of you have heard of the Atkins diet? Anybody? All right, how about all of us have. And what was Atkins' idea? He said, to be healthy, you need to eat a predominantly meat diet. Is that the thing to do? No. Well, the Bible, Ellen White, very clearly showed that the best diet for man is a vegetarian diet. We weren't made to eat flesh food. You look at our teeth. I know when I was over in Kenya, quite a number of years ago now, I was preaching out underneath this very large tree. This was in Kilgoris, Kenya. Kilgoris, Kenya, a small town right near Lake Victoria. So I'm out underneath this tree, and within 10 feet of where I was talking, there were about a half a dozen large cows. And so I looked at the people who were all, in fact, the one tribe where I was speaking, they were called Maasai, the Maasai tribe of Western Kenya. Many of them would drink blood from the animals. That was a common occurrence. Oh, yeah, sister. They would drink blood. And so I looked at the folks. I knew that ahead of time. So I looked at them and I was talking to them about health, and I said, look at those cows. Look how healthy and strong they are. I said, do they eat other animals? And through the translator, I'm watching the people, and they're going, cows don't eat other animals. I said, why don't they? And so the people kind of stare at me like, well, I don't know. And I said, have you ever looked in a cow's mouth? A cow has flat teeth. They have flat teeth that grinds food. They don't have those jagged teeth like a lion or a cougar does for tearing of flesh. I said, now run your hand along your teeth. So all the people there at the meeting, they're running their hands along their teeth. And I said, do you have sharp teeth or do you have flat teeth? Well, they said, we have flat teeth. I said, you have teeth just like the cow. We were made to grind food, not to tear it. I think some of them became vegetarians on the spot. But folk, how can we know that some new fad that's out there is wrong? How can we know that? We line it up. Ellen White says this. Ellen White says a vegetarian diet. This is the best thing. This is what we were built to eat. We can stay so far ahead of all the foolish fads of today. I remember when I became a Seventh-day Adventist, I had different family members who would eat several times a day. They would start with breakfast in the morning. In fact, this was my diet for the first 18, 19 years of my life. I'd have breakfast in the morning. I'd have bacon and eggs and toast. Middle of the morning, around 10 o'clock, I'd have a snack. Typically, it would be a donut and milk. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you ain't heard nothing yet. At lunchtime, I'd have my bologna sandwich with some Laura Scudder's potato chips, some cookies, and maybe a banana or an apple. When I got home, middle of the afternoon, my mom would have ready for me right there at the table a plate of cookies and a glass of milk. By supper time at about 5:30 or 6 o'clock, I'd have a hamburger or some chicken that my dad had fried on the barbecue, maybe some pork hot dogs with potato salad. And then before I'd go to bed around 8 or 9 o'clock, Sister Caledonia, I'd have, a great big bowl of sunflower seeds while I'm watching the baseball game on TV. Folk, I was heading for doomsday.
Yeah. Wow.
By the time I was 17 years old, I remember that the name of the restaurant was called La Hacienda. I went out, I had a prime rib steak. I went home, I was an athlete. In fact, to tell you how sports ran in my family, folks, my brother, my older brother, this summer is going to be inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York, as a broadcaster. Folk, we were athletes from the time we were 3 or 4 years old. We lived and breathed sports. I would run 5 miles a day. That's why I've got this bad limp, because I've destroyed the gel that used to be in this hip from constantly pounding the pavement. I loved running long distance. I loved it. 5 miles a day. Well, after eating a steak, I lay down in my bed, and all of a sudden I'm gasping because I can't breathe. And I'm going, I am 17 years old and I can't breathe. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? I had a horrible diet. I was eating meat every meal of the day. I was eating 6 or 7 times a day. I was destroying my life. Folk, when I read what Ellen White said about don't eat between meals, don't eat just before you go to bed, what a blessing that was. What a blessing. I give my body a chance to rest between meals. My stomach has a chance, after it digests my food, to take a break. And then I can sleep good at night because I'm not eating ice cream and sunflower seeds and cookies before I go to bed. Folk, as a Seventh-day Adventist, as somebody who has knowledge of the spirit of prophecy, we can be so healthy and so far ahead of the rest of the world because of the horrible health habits of our society today. So, Kellogg and the Seventh-day Adventists at the turn of the century were far along in front of the rest of the world. But something started to happen at Battle Creek. John Harvey Kellogg began to get the idea that he was somebody. And that, friend, always dictates disaster. Because the Bible says in Galatians chapter 6 and verse 3, it says, "For when a man thinks that he is something, when he is nothing, he deceives himself." That's self-deception, folk. Well, John Harvey Kellogg started to think, William Howard Taft and Thomas Edison and Henry Ford and Goodyear and all these other famous people are coming to sit at his feet. Did something to his head. So when the Battle Creek Sanitarium burnt down in 1902, plans to rebuild it, John Harvey Kellogg was asked, will you write a book to help fund the rebuilding of the sanitarium? Well, Kellogg said, sure. So he wrote a book, and does anybody know the name of the book? Anybody know the name of the book? Caledonia? Okay, you don't. Okay, anybody? He wrote a book called The Living Temple. The Living Temple. And in that book, he espoused the ideas of pantheism. Now, what is pantheism? Well, pantheism says that God is in that pulpit, God is in that chair, God is in that camera, He's in the trees outside, He's in the grass in the backyard, and He's in you, and He's in me. God's everywhere. That's what John Harvey Kellogg said. That's pantheism. And in his pantheistic teachings, Kellogg had done away with the heavenly sanctuary. He had done away with the need for a Savior. He had done away with the need for angels going back and forth from earth to heaven. Because God was everywhere. Why do I need angels to help me if God's in me and He's in you? Very dangerous stuff, folk. And John Harvey Kellogg got the idea because, see, the Battle Creek Sanitarium, the charter for the sanitarium, needed to be renewed every 30 years. So in the early 1900s, the charter needed to be renewed. Well, John Harvey Kellogg got this thought in his mind. He said, I don't need Adventism anymore. I don't need Ellen White anymore. I'm good enough because I'm John Harvey Kellogg. I'm a famous doctor. So John Harvey Kellogg got a group of lawyers. He said, gentlemen, I want us to write a new charter for the Battle Creek Sanitarium. And in this new charter, we're going to make it separate from the church. We're going to call it non-sectarian. Now, that's exactly what John Harvey Kellogg did. And by 1908, using legal manipulations, Kellogg managed to wrest control of Battle Creek Sanitarium and the American Medical College away from the denomination. His medical school collapsed in the spring of 1910 and never opened again. Well, friends, when Kellogg tore the Battle Creek Sanitarium away from the denomination, it appeared as though the medical work in Seventh-day Adventism would collapse. But there was a little white-haired lady in a town called Elms Haven, California. Do you guess what her name was? Ellen White. She saw everything Kellogg was doing. She saw him gathering lawyers in plush offices, going through the charter of Battle Creek Sanitarium. She saw that he was going to pull it from the denomination. And Ellen White knew how important the medical work was to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So, Ellen White saw it as far back as the early 1900s. So what Ellen White did was she got a young man about 38 years old. His name was John Burden. Has anybody in here ever heard the name of John Burden? Nobody has, have you? No. How many of you have ever heard of A.G. Daniels? Some of you have heard of him, haven't you? Yeah. John Burden was the man selected by Ellen White to find a new place in California for the medical work of Seventh-day Adventists to start over again. Because Ellen White saw what was going to happen to Battle Creek. So she commissioned John Burden. She said, John, I want you to go all over Southern California and I want you to find buildings with lots of acreage where we can start the medical missionary work for Seventh-day Adventists. So John Burden found places like National City in 1904. That's right near San Diego. Paradise Valley in the similar area. Glendale near Los Angeles. But Ellen White said, there's another place that God has shown me where we will establish the medical work among Seventh-day Adventists. And it was way east of Los Angeles in an area called the Beautiful Hill. We don't know it by that name, though. We know it by another name. Loma Linda. Loma Linda. There was a hotel right there at Loma Linda near San Bernardino, California. The original owners of the property had gone into bankruptcy. The property and its extensive acreage had been purchased by a group of Los Angeles businessmen and doctors who want to develop it as a health resort. But by the early 1900s, it was going into bankruptcy. And Ellen White told John Burden, that's the place we need to get. So Loma Linda was purchased. John Burden was the man that God raised up. And it was going to be at Loma Linda where the blueprint plan for the Adventist medical work, as the Spirit of Prophecy had outlined it, it was going to be at Loma Linda where young men and women would be trained in the 8 laws of health, in basic medical procedures, in hydrotherapy, and in the 3 angels' messages. And these young men and women from Loma Linda would then go throughout the world as medical missionaries. That was the way it started. You see, folks, Seventh-day Adventist hospitals, sanitariums, they were never, ever to be designed for people to come there to get chemotherapy. Seventh-day Adventist hospitals and sanitariums were never to be places where people were to go to get their legs amputated. Seventh-day Adventist sanitariums were never to be places where people were to go to be filled with drugs. That was never the way it was supposed to be. That was the way the world did it. And those worldly hospitals serve purposes, because sometimes people have so abused the 8 laws of health. Sometimes people do need to be amputated. Sometimes people do need to go to extremes because they have so damaged their health. Well, John Burden, S.N. Haskell, Ellen White start Loma Linda 1905, 1906, 1907, and young men and women are being trained and being sent out throughout the world to be medical missionaries. But there were some people at the General Conference that were afraid. They said, there's something wrong at Loma Linda. We've got to make it like all the worldly hospitals. That was bad news. In October of 1907, 8 years before Ellen White died, in spite of all of her counsel to the contrary, people met in 1907 at Loma Linda to decide the future of the College of Medical Evangelists. See, that's what Loma Linda was first called. Did you know that? It was called the College of Medical Evangelists. It wasn't called Loma Linda. A.G. Daniels told the people at the meeting at Loma Linda, he said this: if they contemplate the establishment of a full-fledged medical college that will be recognized, that will give students a preparation for graduation that will be recognized by legal bodies such as the American Medical Association, he said, you know it, must have such recognition to be worth a nickel. What was A.G. Daniels saying? He was saying this, friends. If Loma Linda is going to be a good hospital, it must be approved by the AMA. It must meet all the requirements of the AMA. Folks, John Burden and Ellen White said no. A.G. Daniels said yes, we've got to get it approved by the American Medical Association. Do you know what that would mean? Well, let me ask you. All of us, I think, you've been in Seventh-day Adventist churches. Have you ever noticed that once a quarter or twice a year, the offering goes to Loma Linda? Have you noticed that? You noticed that, didn't you? Do you know why that is, friend? Because Loma Linda and A.G. Daniels decided they were going to become accredited by the American Medical Association. And that costs millions upon millions of dollars. Why? Well, the AMA comes along, they visit Loma Linda, and they say, you need a bigger library. So they have to buy all the materials to build a larger library. You've got to add more books. So they have to add all these books. You've got to add more teachers to teach more subjects. Teachers have to be paid, don't they? Loma Linda came under terrible debt. John Burden, whom Ellen White had said was led by God, was gradually pushed out from Loma Linda. A.G. Daniels and the denomination had made Loma Linda into a cash cow. $25,000 back in the 1912, 1913 needed to construct a small hospital on the campus. That's what the AMA said. And now today, folks, if you've ever been to Southern California, this is the monster. This is the monster that's called Loma Linda Medical Center. Right here. It's a massive, it looks like a mountain, a snowy mountain. That's Loma Linda, friends. $400,000 had to be put to improve Loma Linda. This was back in 1914. $400,000? That's in the millions today, friends. Because the decision to obtain accreditation had been made, Loma Linda was no longer independent. Add these courses, remove those courses. Textbooks on these subjects must be used. Put all these into your library. Add this equipment, remodel your buildings, increase the number of beds, add more doctors and nurses. On and on it went. Ever more requirements and expenses were demanded. Folk, have any of you ever been in debt? Yeah, we all have, haven't we? And it hangs over us like a noose, doesn't it? Like it's going to just strangle us. That's what happened at Loma Linda. And it wasn't just the college and the little hospital at Loma Linda. that was under duress. This was the entire denomination. All the way back at the time when Ellen White died in 1915. This has been going on for over 100 years. Notice this statement taken from D.E. Robinson's book, Story of Our Health Message, page 392. It says, a glance at the minutes of the meeting of the trustees of the College of Medical Evangelists, Loma Linda, held in Tacoma Park, Washington, October 1913. Ellen White's still alive. In connection with the Autumn Council of the General Conference Committee, reveals a feeling of genuine dismay at the seemingly endless streams of money needed for the building program. Emergencies innumerable had been met by the borrowing of more money. More money, more money. The indebtedness of the institution had been mounting yearly. Besides this, increasing requirements from the American Medical Association were bringing added perplexities. Why, in the Adventist Church today, we're going to take up an offering today for Loma Linda. The debt, friends, is enormous. Because Loma Linda and A.G. Daniels determined that that hospital would be like every other worldly hospital. And that, friend, was not the worst of it. The worst part is still to come. Ellen White had written 5 years before her death. She said, I was instructed that the whole matter was inspired by human wisdom. Men have followed their own wisdom, which is foolishness with God, and which, if they continue to follow, will lead to results they do not now see. The spiritual eyesight has been blinded. See, the brethren thought, well, eventually the AMA will stop asking and making demands. They never stopped, friends. Albert Einstein said that the definition for insanity is doing the very same thing over and over again and thinking you're going to get different results. You're not. You're not. Unless we stop. I was reading a story last Sabbath of the people that started the temperance movement in the United States during Ellen White's lifetime. There was a man, I don't remember his name, but this man was a well-known businessman, made good amounts of money. But he decided to turn to alcohol. And he started to drink. And gradually over time, this one sin, this one thing that he refused to give back to God, eventually his business started to fall, started to collapse. Then as his business started to fall, his family started to fall too. And friends, the story I read tells of this man seeing his business collapsing, seeing his family collapsing. They're becoming beggars. This man, he comes to a decision, and he says, I will make a covenant with God today, right now, and I will renew that covenant with God every single morning, because I will not go back to that alcohol. Friends, each day that man got on his knees and he said, Lord, I will enter into an agreement with you this morning that by your grace and through me choosing your grace through the day, I will not touch the alcohol. Folk, he made that decision in the morning. He claimed some Bible promises that God gave him for that one day. And that whole day, when the devil attacked him, he would claim those promises. And the man started staying away from his alcohol. And his job, the job started getting better and better. His family started being more at peace and happy again. Friends, it took a determined decision on the part of that man. He was an alcoholic. His life was going to the pits. Now, friends, I don't know if it was because of his background as a child. Maybe his father was an alcoholic. I don't know. But we know in the spirit of prophecy that Ellen White is very clear. Christ is able to help us overcome our hereditary and cultivated tendencies to evil. Now the question is, will we stop the avalanche? Will we stop the avalanche and make a covenant with God? Will we do that? Loma Linda never did. And the denomination today is being destroyed from what happened at Loma Linda. In our personal lives, will we make a covenant with God today? Will we make a stand today, and whatever has held us back, if something is causing us to fall, if something is causing us to face financial failure, will we make a covenant with God this morning? Will we determine and claim God's promise every day to stay away from that which is destroying us?
Amen.
The church didn't make that decision, friend. And the Adventist church is destroying itself. It's destroying itself. Will we make the decision individually this morning?